Good afternoon. Welcome to our session. It's 2 o'clock now. Since we have some non-Dutch people in the audience, we're going to do this session in English. If you don't understand it or something, please ask and we can translate to Dutch when needed. My name is Kenneth van Surksum, and I'm one of the presenters. Because in this session you don't get one presenter, but you get two for the price of one.
For money.
Yeah.
For one.
Okay.
So my name is Peter Daalmans, and also one of the presenters. And I think we are here because of the Windows Management User Group. And yeah, let's get started about this session about modern application management.
Okay. The first thing we are going to talk about, and our slides are in Dutch, so sorry about that, but what are modern applications? Because they are slightly different to the applications we are used to nowadays. So they have some different aspects. How can we deploy those applications, or how can we normally get those applications? We're going to talk about business stores. Because business stores is actually something which solves a lot of problems for companies nowadays, where they actually, I have customers who actually give all of their employees like a sort of amount of money they can spend within the iTunes store and stuff. And that's not something you want as a company. So you want to buy maybe 100 licenses and give them to the users dynamically. And that's where the business stores can help. One other thing which is really important is data protection nowadays. If we are going to share data on things like Sharepoint, OneDrive, we have the possibility to share it with the whole world. Maybe we want to do something with data protection as well. And last, but especially not least, if we are going to deploy apps to devices which are managed, but especially to devices which are not managed, we want to have some control of what those applications can do. And yeah, within Intune, we have the possibility to determine that for both devices and applications as well. We're going to show you that in the next couple of minutes. What we see, and also Kent in his session before us already told that, is that we see a new type of device management solution which is coming up. And Microsoft refers to that as modern management. And modern management, well, it's especially suited for companies who are starting nowadays. If you buy Office 365, you get a lot of functionality. And if you combine that with functionality like Windows Autopilot and Azure Active Directory, you might be able to create a workspace which works in the cloud only. And that is actually the modern-based workspace nowadays. In order to support that, you also see nowadays that Microsoft is also releasing products which are capable of doing just that. Windows 10S it will be an operating system where you cannot install traditional applications on anymore, but only use applications which you install from the application store. So that's a whole another way of thinking about applications and managing those kinds of machines. Looking at the transition from traditional to modern, we actually see that some products will actually be overtaken by other products. Just like Kent just said, it's not a black and white situation where all of a sudden your company decides we're going to do modern management, but we actually see hybrid scenarios where within the company some people will use the modern way and will be managed in a modern way, while other people just work traditionally, and we can manage that with SCCM as well. Well, what are modern apps? Well, actually, modern apps are applications which we install from a store. If you look at the normal traditional applications, they actually install files on your hard drive. They put some registry keys in the registry of a machine. And what we also see is that normally perhaps some DLLs are registered, etc. And those applications are being made available to the whole system. What we see with modern applications is actually that they are more like containers. What we actually know like from the AppV environment. So they are more like standalone containers. And they are usually installed within the user context as well. Therefore, if we want to remove those applications, we can actually remove the file and the whole application and all of it is gone on the system itself. So I think that on the long term, the modern applications are the applications with the most, which have the future. But that doesn't mean that the current way of applications and the way we install it using MSI executables and stuff will disappear on short term, but on the longer term it will. If an application developer would come to me and ask me, Kenneth, I want to develop a new application, how should I do it? I would strongly advise him to do it in a modern way and not in the traditional way like we are used to today. Those applications, they have extensions. So perhaps you already worked with those kind of installers, but it's called IPA, APK, and AppX. AppX is for the Windows environment. The IPA is for the Apple environment, and the APK is for Android devices. And there we have especially the difference compared to how we traditionally managed PCs, that was mostly Windows-based. But nowadays, we can do management of applications on both Windows, Android, Apple devices, and even Linux if we want to. Now, for that, we can use SCCM as well. Again, if we want to buy those applications in volume, we can use the stores provided by Apple, by Google, or by Microsoft itself. What's really a pity is that it's not possible yet to buy an application which you can use over platforms itself. But yeah, that's just the way it is for now. And perhaps that can change in the future. Another thing, when looking at applications, we see more and more applications being web-based nowadays, where actually the way the application presents itself is depending on the device on which you look at it. So like on a mobile device, it's tailored towards the resolution you have on the mobile screen. And if you start it on a real big screen, it looks different, but it's still the same application. So therefore, we see more and more companies actually preferring web-based applications over other types of applications. So if you look at Intune and the way we can manage applications, there are a couple of applications which are actually written using the Intune software development kit. And because they are written with the Intune SDK, we can manage them with Intune as well. We have some demonstrations later in this session, but now we are able to manage those applications, and we can also specify what those applications can do or cannot do, which is also important as well. Well, you can click on the link above, and it will show you a website with all the applications currently supported. Of course, all the Microsoft applications are supported as well, especially the mostly used applications from Office and other stuff. Okay. If we use Intune to manage our mobile devices, because that's one of the things we can do, we can actually make applications available or install applications on those devices. What the way that happens really depends on the type of device itself. So the experience for the end user, unfortunately, isn't the same if you're using an Apple device or an Android device. But that's the way it is. And that's not something, of course, Microsoft can define. It's something the developer of the OS specifies.
Yeah, like on Android, you get a push notification that you need to install an app because it's a required app. And on iOS, you depending on if it's an app through that comes through the volume purchase program, or just via the normal app store, you get a notification. Okay, this app is being installed, and it will notify you until the app is installed.
So the end user experience is quite different.
Yeah.
But I'm used to working with Apple equipment, and the experience as an Apple user is actually quite seamless, to say so. But because we now have a management solution, Intune in our case, which is able to manage mobile devices, or a Windows 10 device, which we actually manage as a mobile device as well, we have more control over the applications we want to install. Besides that, if we decide to not enroll our mobile device in Intune, we still have the possibility to manage applications on personal devices of users as well. So we have support for both the company-owned device as the bring-your-own device scenario, where we actually manage applications itself. And that's a whole other way of doing application management compared to the way we did that the last couple of years.
So if we look at the business stores, and we have a business store for Apple, Microsoft, and Android, it basically comes down to the same principle. We as a company can buy applications upfront and pay them upfront for your users, so that the user, if he wants to install an app that costs a couple of dollars, don't need to use his own credit card to install the app before he's able to use it. So as a company, we're able to sign in into a portal. I will show that very quickly. Get the apps, acquire the apps, maybe an amount of number of apps you want to acquire, you pay for it, and it's synchronized automatically to the MDM, in this case, Intune. For the end user, in this case, it's an example of Windows, but it comes down to the same again. In this case, the user logs into Windows, and the application will automatically push. If it's an available app, you need to go to the company portal, of course. But if it's a required app, the application will be pushed. Same counts for Android and iOS. If you want to revoke the access, or you want to revoke the license, the application can also be uninstalled. So this is a good way to control your applications, and you can buy them as a company, and you control who's using what application. And the users don't need to invest and reimburse the applications if they want to use it. So with all that, with modern IT, modern application management, we need some kind of layer of protection. Of course, if you look at EMS, you can protect the data itself by using information protection, Azure Information Protection. But with Intune, if you use the Intune SDK, you're able to control also what's happening within the app. And I will show that in a demo, is that when I use Outlook app and I configure my corporate account next to a private account, they can live next to each other, but they cannot exchange data by copy and paste. So, but a new feature, I think, since a year we have that in Intune, we can also finally allow only access to Exchange Online or Sharepoint Online for certain apps. And in this case, only managed apps. So we can force the user to use the Outlook app instead of the native iOS client, and which is pretty powerful if you want to also control the data, where the data is going.
Yeah.
And of course, we have Azure AD Conditional Access to provide device-based conditional access, and based on your compliance state, if your device is been encrypted, or if you have a PIN configured, or if you're using a third-party integration with Lookout, if a threat has been detected, if that's all not okay, then you're not compliant, and you won't get access to Exchange Online. But I think with the modern way, with MEM without enrollment functionality within Intune, which basically means you don't need to be managed to get access, but you need to use certain apps to get access to your Exchange Online environment.
Yeah. So what we're actually doing is, especially in the case of, for example, devices which are also contain personal data, we actually are creating work environments on those devices as well. But the main disadvantage of, for example, an iPad, which we have lying around here, is that those devices don't support a multi-persona scenario. Eh? So, for example, the iPad I brought with us for the demo is the iPad my daughter uses most of the time. But what we don't want is that she is able to send an invite for one of the games she is playing using the company email address which I configured on my device. Yeah. So in order to circumvent that, we have to make some, we have to take some measures in order to make sure that the application can only be used by the one who is authorized for that. And one of the examples in order to accomplish that is, for example, by setting a PIN code on the application, which is something different than setting a PIN code on the device itself.
Yeah, purely on the work environment.
Yeah.
Other MDM solutions have their work environment created on the device, and in that work environment, you have certain work apps you can access. So you need to enter a PIN to open the work environment, and then you are able to access your mail and such. Intune and Microsoft have a different approach, and they basically manage the app, and based on the apps, they are multi-identity aware and can manage just the work environment instead of everything.
So what we want to accomplish, especially with the conditional access scenario, is that actually access to company data is given to only the applications which we can manage as well. And there's the big difference from a managing perspective.
Yeah, and again, if you've attended the Kent session, next month or this month, we have David James at our user group. He's the SCCM man there is. A long time ago we thought Wally Mead was the guy, but he was even higher up the chain. So if you want to talk with the guy who owns SCCM, if you want to know the future of SCCM, where we go as a SCCM admin, be sure to attend our user group. It's free, so you get drinks and food. So
yeah.
So, but to do the nice things, let's dive into some demos and show what's happening in Intune. So how many of you are already working with Intune or have looked at Intune before? Okay, a couple of you, that's good. So I think the majority of the development time of the product team invested last year was moving away from the old Silverlight portal to this new Azure portal, which allows us to basically open and manage Intune from any device, which is pretty great.
And from any browser as well. Huh? Yeah.
And from any browser. So let's first quickly, I want to show you how the volume purchase goes for Windows, and I can also show you for iOS, but let's show it for Windows. If we go to the Windows Store for Business, this is already enabled. And if we open the Business Store, I will be able to log in, and this time it's in Dutch, not in Danish.
Almost the same.
Almost the same.
Just depends on the number of times.
So here you see that I am already able to see apps which I can acquire. So if I, for instance, want to buy Wunderlist for my users, which is already there, I think, but I can click Download App. And then Wunderlist has been added to my inventory. Easy as this. If I go to the dashboard and click Sync, then in the background, the Intune service will synchronize with the Microsoft Store for Business and get the latest apps I acquired. So if we go to Apps, and let me see if it's already there, and there it is already. Let's zoom it for this.
So even though we have different business stores, like the one from Android, from Apple, and from Microsoft, we can actually have a unified interface in the terms of Intune, where we can actually make sure those applications come together again.
So yeah, if you see here below, Wunderlist is added, and it's a Windows Store for Business app. They renamed it just recently to Microsoft Store. But here you see also an iOS app, which comes from the iOS VPP program. And for Android for Work, up there, you see that it's an app synchronized from the Android for Work store. So basically what you can do, this app is being added automatically, and the only thing you need to do is to assign the app to an Azure AD group, which can be synchronized from your local AD, or maybe they are just being used, being created and managed in the cloud.
Yeah, so for people who are used to work with Configuration Manager, within Configuration Manager, if we have, for example, an application and we have a collection, we have a deployment which actually deploys the application towards that collection. And within Intune, it's actually called an assignment. So what we can do is we actually assign to an Azure AD group, and an Azure AD group can either be provisioned manually, so where you actually add a device or a user to that group, or we have the possibility using a query to actually fill up groups dynamically. So we can make groups with all the iPads, with all the iPhones, with all the Android devices. And based on that, we can actually give some policies to that specific group. That can also be, of course, groups which we actually synchronize from the local Active Directory containing users which are member of a global group, for example.
So I've chosen the EMS-enabled users, and then I'm able to assign it as available, which means that it's being available in the company portal as required. Then the application is pushed automatically, and you can install it. And if it's not applicable, then I don't see the meaning for that one. So in this case, I just select required, and I am able to select the device of the license type. And Zoom it is not really helping today, but you're able to select the user license or the device license. So basically what's happening if the application is installed in the user context, so it's only available for the user, or it's installed on a device level and then it's available for all users. So if we switch to my iPad, and then hopefully...
Are there people here who already set up the company store within the Windows stuff? You can do that if you are an office administrator. You can actually go to the Windows Store for Business with your global administrator account. You have to accept the license terms, and then you have the Windows Store for Business available. That's also where you initiate the auto-deployment stuff, which Ken showed in the session before this session.
Yep. So here you see my iPad, or it's Ken's iPad. So I have already pre-configured my Exchange account, and I want to access my corporate email. But the first thing I see is that my company won't allow me to synchronize my email with the native Apple iOS app. So I will be redirected to access the Apple Store and buy the right app, in this case, the Outlook app. So I already installed it. So when I open it, it will open soon. And then you will see that since this is a bring your own device, I already configured my private email. So there are some emails already available. If I want to add a new account, I can do that. And here you see that since this device is bring your own, but it is enrolled into Intune, you see that the Outlook app already recognized, okay, this user is already being configured via the company portal, so why not give the option to add this account? So if I click Add Account, you will see that I don't need to add the outlook.office365.com URL, etc., etc. I'm just able to access my email very quickly. So and here you see that it is syncing a little bit. And that I have access via this app. And it's I can switch between my private stuff and my this is my private stuff. Oh no, this is my private stuff and my business stuff, or I just can use a combined view where everything is ending in the same inbox. So for the user, it looks like the same inbox.
Yeah. So from the apps perspective, we're actually seeing the trend now that actually apps are able to understand the difference between company data and personal data. Before this, we actually had different apps, like the good ones, where we actually had the company data in a different app than the private stuff. But this actually gives us the one uniform email client where we have all the email in there.
Yeah. So how do we configure this? And let's quickly switch back to the Windows machine. Yep, there it is. In the Azure console, we have basically two locations where we can do this. One is the Intune App Protection space, and here we are able to configure conditional access for Exchange Online and SharePoint Online. So if I click Exchange Online, I can choose to allow this for all apps, or just the apps that support the Intune app policies. And if I choose this option, then you get a list of pre-populated apps, which normally could have access to Exchange Online. A way to deploy or assign this policy is by restricting access to user groups. In this case, we have 2 user groups, but yeah, it's not enabled by default for all users. So you need to assign it to a special group.
This gives us the possibility to do first a pilot deployment within the organization, because we see a lot of organizations actually having Intune already, but not doing the conditional access stuff. So we are able to do it on a start with a small pilot group and then extend it towards the whole company.
Yeah. So, and of course, we have the option to exempt the CEO because, they don't want to comply to any rule, like we all know. There's one remark, however, which I came across at a customer recently. If you enable this feature and you're also using modern authentication on Windows 10, then Windows 10 will also be blocked. So it's good to assign this policy, maybe not to all of your users, especially if you also want to lightly manage Windows 10 or modern manage Windows 10. And so to scope it down. I think they are working on this to solve it, but currently it is still an issue. So let's...
Yes, okay. One of the other stuff we actually want to show you, what we are able to do with Intune as well, is actually that if we are going to deploy applications, we actually want to configure those applications as well. Because nowadays, if we install applications which, for example, have connectivity to backend services, we have to do something to tell that application it actually where it needs to connect to, like a backend server, maybe a connection string, or all those kind of things. Well, with Intune, and we also have the possibilities to deploy applications, but also to deploy company-specific connection or configuration strings. So that's something I'm going to demo today. And in order to do that, we are going to use the Intune managed browser, which is actually a browser which was made by Microsoft with the Intune SDK, so it's aware of company policies and stuff. In order to do so, we need to do the following. We go to the Intune blade within the Azure portal. As you can see now, we have 2 Intune blades. We have the Intune and the Intune App Protection blades, but Microsoft just announced last week on Ignite that they are going to merge that. So eventually in the end, you only have one Intune blade where all the device management and application management takes place. Then again, if we go to mobile apps, as you can see here, we have so-called app configuration policies. And an app configuration policies gives us the ability to deploy apps, but to also provide configuration to that app as well. So for this demo, we created an app configuration policy, which actually applies to... I have to scroll down for that, sorry. To the managed browser experience, as you can see below. So what kind of configuration can we deploy? Well, that depends on the application itself. So what kind of settings we can deploy is really a matter of what the builder of the applications allows you to configure for that application. For example, in our case, Microsoft, for the managed browser, allows us to specify a start page, search. We can provide a whitelist, a blacklist, and there's a, if you want to, there's an article from Microsoft which actually explains which settings we can give to the managed browser as well. Well, eventually, as I told before, we need to assign that. In this case, we are going to assign it to the Peter test group. That's it's an honor to be part of that group as well, Peter. And we are actually going to use that group to do so. But it's also important that that you see here that we can actually have different policies which we apply to different types of groups within the company. So once applied, and if we continue on our Apple device, let me see. So I hope you can switch. You have signal. I have to keep it steady.
Maybe replug it in.
Yeah, let me replug it. Presenting with an Apple device isn't that stable yet. Sorry about that. Do we have signal? Shall we try that one?
Looking in the back. Yep, there it is.
Okay. Okay, sorry about that delay, guys. So what we have here is my iPad is enrolled within Intune. In order to do that, to do the enrollment nowadays, we have to download an application. It's called the bedrijfsportal in Dutch, or the company portal in English. And actually, once we are deployed, we actually have an extra application, but underneath, a management profile is installed in case of an Apple device. And from there, we actually get policy from the Intune service. So especially on an iPad, it's quite easy to see what kind of policy is being applied by going to the control panel and looking at mobile apparaatbeheer in Dutch, the wonderful Dutch language. But what we can see here is actually what's being applied from the Intune management. So it's a quite handy overview to see what's really going on. And what we can see here as well is that we have some applications applied to my device as well. And one of that applications is the Intune managed browser. And well, you can see it on the screen. There are some things which I can't do with the application because it's being managed by Intune. So how does that look from an end user perspective? Well, if I go to that application and start the browser, if we start, firstly, I'm presented with the ability to provide a password. I already did that, but without the password, I can't start the application. So if the application gives us access to company resources, my daughter, if she doesn't know the password, can't enter the application. Also, the length of the passcode is, we can set that. So it's now at 4 digits, but we can also make it 6 or 8. In my case, it's my wedding day, so I don't forget it. And as you can see here, for example, the applications, which normally doesn't start anything, actually has the WMUG, our website, as starting page. And that's something I configured using the app configuration policy. The other thing is actually providing links within the, in this case, bladwijzers or the bookmarks in English. And actually, for example, search, redirects us to Google. So we see more and more applications supporting, besides the fact that you can actually deploy it using a mobile management device management solution, that we can also start configuring those applications. For example, and that's something we didn't show, we also have the ability, for example, to provision an application which actually starts a VPN connection to our on-premise environment, where we can actually have communication with back-end services which are relying in our company.
Micro-VPN, like the micro-VPN? Like
Yeah,
VPN?
indeed. So it's
Microsoft is currently working with Citrix also to
Yeah.
to create a solution where the Citrix Zen mobile capability of hooking into the application and set up a micro VPN towards the Netscaler. They are working on a tight integration with Intune also. So that's pretty cool.
So instead of setting up a VPN for the whole device, the VPN is actually initiated when the app is started. And if you close the app, actually the VPN is disconnected as well at that moment.
But I like to mention, we're talking about modern apps. I think it's also modern to have cloud apps, so web pages, and then you might not need a VPN anymore. You can publish your internal websites through the Azure Web Application Proxy, for instance, and that's purely HTTPS traffic which you use.
The last example of what I wanted to show you guys is that also, for example, Adobe is actually providing an application which, as you can see with the shield mark, is actually written with the Intune SDK. So we can actually manage that application as well. So it's although most of the applications are Microsoft applications, we see more and more applications from third-party vendors actually having some Intune SDK enlightenment to say so.
Yeah.
So what we just demoed is that besides determining what we can do with the application once it's installed, we can also give some configuration to the application while we install it as well. We need to switch back to the laptop again. Yep.
Can we switch again? Yep. Yeah, thanks.
Okay. A lot to show within 45 minutes. I think this is a topic we can discuss maybe in 5 days as well. So I hope you have got a glimpse of what's possible nowadays with modern applications and how we manage that. So we actually manage it on the application level and not on the OS level anymore.
The operating system becomes less important. Just making sure that the apps, and maybe let's quickly, before we go, let's show you the capabilities of the MEM controls we have. And if we, for instance, not create a configuration policy, but a MEM, an application management policy, we're not only able to control our copy-paste behavior, but we can prevent Android backups so that the data is not backupped to Google Drive or something. We can control where data can be saved, for instance, only to OneDrive for Business, because that's something we own. We can restrict content if there's a link in an email that it's only allowed to use the managed browser, which Kenneth showed just now. We can configure a lot, and this is what is being added, and we can also look at the device. So let's quickly go up, because we can check if a device is being jailbroken or not. And normally, we only could do that with MDM. But also with MEM, we are able to see, okay, if this device is jailbroken, then we don't trust it, and we won't give access to our environment. And we can look at versions of Android or iOS, and allow access only for the trusted iOS versions.
So let's wrap things up. Well, again, I hope we gave you some insight on what's possible. There's a lot more possibilities. So yeah, we are really happy if we can share that with you maybe in another session.
Yeah, in a year will happen a lot.
Yeah. For now, please use session code 42 if you on the evaluation forum. And we want to thank you for your time.
Right. Thank you.